Well, 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 it is the return of the polling station with Johnny Ward. No Neil Shannon this week. He's busy getting on with life, but we are joined by Paul Krishnamurty and our very own William Kedjanyi. We have so much to get through this week, and I have a list here in case I forget anything. In case you've forgotten, Donald Trump is suing the US government over the FBI raid on his home. He's somehow still 3-1 joint favorite with DeSantis for the next presidency. DeSantis faces Charlie Crist in the midterm elections in Florida. That's news that's just breaking. Liz Cheney lost her seat to another Trump-backed lunatic in Wyoming. That happened last week. So the Democrats have hardened to 8-13 for the Senate. But I do read from Marion McKeown's article in the Business Post. He's writing some great stuff in Ireland at the moment. This, in a nutshell, is the problem for Republicans. Trump-endorsed candidates have won 178 primaries and lost just 17, but they're losing ground to Democrats in states that should be theirs for the taking. The reason, quite simply, many of the Republican candidates are not just unelectable, many seem downright certifiable. Now, speaking of which, there's still a battle for the head of the Conservative Party in Britain, which we'll get to later. It obviously looks like Liz Truss is to lose, but in a good move, you would argue, Conservative activists are going to be offered free condoms at this year's party conference, which I think we can all agree is probably good for humanity. And the great man, Paul Krishnamurty, wants to bring up Brazil as well, where another lunatic on the far right looks like he might actually be losing. I'm going to start with you, Paul. You brought up the litany of legal problems that Donald Trump has coming down the tracks. We had these extraordinary scenes of the FBI raid. How is he still 3-1 joint favorite to be the next US president? What price is he to be in jail by then?
I don't think he'll go to jail. I think if Trump was looking,
God bless America.
If in the very unlikely scenario that he was actually looking at jail, I think he would suddenly develop long COVID or admit dementia or something that he would not be seen fit to stand trial. But look, it's the same story we've had for 6 years. This complete and utter magical thinking, personality cult thing that surrounds Trump, when no one looks at him from a balanced perspective and says, like somehow it's a good thing that the FBI raided his home and are investigating him for the Espionage Act, and that it appears that he has taken America's top national security.
700 pages, Paul. 700 pages of classified records found in his gaff.
Yeah, but Hillary, what about her emails? Yeah, but Biden, but what, this is what they'll do, and they'll just find a new argument every single time. And like this latest thing, I mean, it's like, but the FBI is stitching him up, or that they're, it's a fishing expedition. What nonsense. I mean, again, go back through the Trump era. Let's go back to him becoming president. The FBI have constantly been indicting Trump allies, associates, donors, etc. Right? Mueller indicted over 100. Right? Every single one of these people has been convicted, right? Or didn't fight the indictment. Yesterday, a story that I was going on about, boring everyone to tears, I think, in 2020, which was in Michigan, when during lockdown, the far-right militia, Trump's army, literally laid siege to the state legislature and locked the governor was locked in her room. Mm-hmm. A few weeks later, there was a plot to kidnap her. Mm-hmm. Well, yesterday, those people were sent to prison, right, for the plot to kidnap her. Again, for 2 years, all you got from right-wing media was, it's a stitch-up, it's a coup, it's, FBI overreach. And they're doing it here. There is no way they would have raided Trump's property if they didn't know what they were looking for. They weren't very confident to get a result. They've got informants on the inside. And, of course, the story itself has been around for like months and months, and we knew he had some of this information.
This is basically fascism, Paul, and it's like I read this as well from the same article from Marion McKeown. The Arizona Republicans' plans to oust Democratic Senator and former astronaut Mark Kelly are in disarray, with another Trump-endorsed acolyte, Blake Masters, trailing him by 8 points. In the critically important governor's race, Carrie Lake, another flame-throwing Trump supporter who recently claimed Republicans with guns form the largest standing army in the world. Like, am I actually reading this? No wonder humanity is screwed.
That's right. But, and I mean, okay, look, I mean, we could talk about humanity being screwed all night, but just from a betting point of view,
That is the best ever line for the polling station. Humanity is screwed, but just from a betting point of view.
This is a disaster for Republicans. Arizona is central to everything. If they are going to win back the Senate, they have to really win Arizona. It's take that out of it and their path narrows. And they've elected a fascist, backed by Peter Thiel, the Facebook board member and PayPal founder who backs fascists everywhere, right? And Kelly's popular. Kelly was a popular incumbent anyway. So you can put that in the blue column immediately. Kelly isn't losing to that nutcase.
Okay.
And thus, the 8-13 about Democrats for the Senate is just an outstanding bet. Now, we had another result last night, a really big bellwether in a house race, a special election house race in the 19th district in New York, where the district went plus 1.5% for Biden, so a real marginal. And you would expect historically in a midterm special election, the party without the White House gets a big boost. You know, Republicans have been winning special elections the last 2 years. Democrats were winning the previous 4. And the Democrats upset the odds there last night and won that seat. And they really just went all in on abortion. And that proved decisive. It got their vote out. So there is a real lesson here to Democrats around the country for how to fight in November. And, you know, it's looking good for them now. I don't know about them winning the House, but they might win it. Just to have a chance is a good thing. But I'm really confident they will win that. They will control the Senate. I mean,
yeah. I seem to recall bringing you in, William. I seem to recall this was an 8-11 poll last week. I may be wrong on that, so it has hardened into 8-13. But by any standards, even by the standards of recent US politics, it's been a fairly extraordinary few weeks. I genuinely do despair for humanity when the land of the free is going in the direction of a liar, a fascist, a narcissist, still somehow 3-1 joint favorite. But if you look at the betting on the Star Sports website, it's quite mad because Joe Biden is 6s. DeSantis and Trump are 3s the pair, which is basically even money coupled. It's 14s bar Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris 14s. Don't see that happening. And I mentioned Liz Cheney, who may or may not run. She's 100-1 poke, on which maybe the future of the Conservative Party may somewhat slide towards her in due course if Trump finally gets his comeuppance. But what have you made of it all?
I would agree with a lot of the stuff that Paul said. The idea that Republicans might be hampered by weak candidates has been well known in political circles in the US for a few months now. I think we're really beginning to see that put into focus, especially in the light of the decision on Roe v. Wade. And I think also in light of what's happened in the last week, because it's just put all Republicans into focus again. The Trump raid, it's made them that sort of central talking point, and all that noise around them, which I think in the past had sort of been good to fire at their base, might be playing so well now. Majority of Americans are in favor of Trump being investigated and being held to account. We can't deny the attraction that his base has to him, but we cannot also deny the fact that when you take all American voters and you include independents into that, there's pretty broad public support for Trump just being treated as any other citizen should be. And that could be another anchor on them in the midterm elections, along with, of course, abortion. So,
William, how can you reason with a bunch of people, a large bunch of people who somehow bought into this absolute bullshit that if they can do Trump, they can do anyone, they can do the ordinary person, to the extent that there was immediately a fundraiser for him after the FBI raid? How can you reason with these idiots?
You can't, but you can also beat them via turnout, right? That was a big part of Joe Biden's success. A lot of it was people went out to vote because they knew the stakes were high. And now suddenly you've had one big event which has really heightened the stakes. So turnout's going to be very important, as are sort of turnout indicators. And those are definitely things I'd be tracking if I had investments in these midterm races. You know, what's the enthusiasm amongst the groups who are likelier to vote Democrat? I think we know the Trump base probably will turn out. They're definitely being fired up to do so, but that's another thing I'd be looking at. But I'd agree with Paul's assessment. Worth remembering there's a lot of ground still to be covered here. There's a lot of time for a campaign to go belly up like Dr. Oz's nearly has on several occasions, and there's a lot of time for money to come in. But if you're a Democrat, I think you have to be happier now than you would have been at the beginning of the year. You probably have to be happier with how things have gone over the last month or so than the Republicans have.
Totally. Actually, on that, Paul, I mean, you've been a constant defender of Sleepy Joe in the sense of the job he's doing, even when his improvement ratings weren't especially high. And it's actually been noted that, we'll say, with the climate bill and getting passed and all this good stuff that's happened for Joe Biden, as William says, over the last month or so, it's actually not really been reported. It's almost like it's not sexy to report on this, and everyone's infatuated with Trump.
No, that's right. This is the challenge. I think there's a far wider lesson about politics here, right, in the modern world, which is that, look, you know, I don't hide my politics, right? I am an Obama-Biden guy. You know, Obama was my favourite president of all time by a long way. But I would actually say, in terms of accomplishments, Biden's a better president.
Wow.
He's actually done loads, right? And people said he couldn't do these things. And his leadership on the world stage has been just magnificent, really. Much better than Obama's ever was, right?
Are you exonerating him over Afghanistan, or are you...
Yeah, I do, because it was a fire that Trump set. You know, again, that wasn't reported. Trump did a deal with the Taliban, released hundreds of prisoners, and stopped paying the Afghan army. This was this was a Russian op, like everything he does, to blow up America and to blow up the opposition. And they even boasted about they were setting fires Biden put out, right? But if you take the Ukraine thing and the unifying NATO again, this is wonderful news. This is the most optimistic news I've had in years. So I'm well behind Biden. But the bottom line is, we live in a very shallow, social media driven, short clips, meme culture now.
Dystopia.
And dystopia, yeah. But Biden, you know, a man of his age who stutters, who's always had a stutter, is just an easy person to meme against. And you know, I Brits who I know don't follow much European American politics, and who I don't disagree with me politically, they often say things to me like, "Oh, that geezer, he doesn't know what he's talking about, does he? Can't finish a sentence." And you know, it's a very hard sell. That said, his approval ratings are up, and I think if the Republicans go into the presidential election with Trump or with someone pushing that agenda, he'd have every chance. But, you know.
So can I ask you, from your perspective, how have we gotten to a situation where the head of the conservative movement in the US, after everything that happened in Capitol Hill, after the FBI raid, after everything we've had, still has such an apparent stranglehold on the party and voters? I cannot get my head around that.
Simple. Weapons grade propaganda being micro-targeted on Facebook and YouTube. Again, I refer to the Michigan thing. Before that Michigan chaos, right, Trump's campaign were openly boasting about what they were about to unleash on Michigan via Facebook, right? And this is the story of politics in the 21st century. And it does seem to me, it's the same with Brexit, it's the same with populism everywhere, right? And I just think people are in denial about it. They don't want to admit it because it's so hard to challenge. But we didn't get to the bottom of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And if we do, we're going to end back at the Kremlin. And we're going to end up with transnational organised crime, right? Because that's what this is. This is a global assault on democracy and the rule of law by a global crime syndicate, right? And people are either too scared to say that because they'll be targeted, right? Or they just don't want to admit it.
William, on the much more benign issue of markets, what's been happening, and what has, obviously the 8 to 11 has shortened. It's been a good few weeks for the Democrats. I just find the whole thing compelling. I don't really know where the Conservatives are going with Trump still as the head of the party, but I do kind of feel between now and 2024 a lot is going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that, and there'll be many big moments that we haven't yet seen coming down the road. I think the Democrats probably feel that they're in a bit better place about now. I think that they can't take anything for granted yet, but they're moving in the right direction. They have some achievements that they can shout about. All of that stuff makes your general approach to voters easier, having something to defend, something to get excited for. And I think as long as they've got reasons to energize their voters, they should feel that they've got the competitive chance. baby of holding on to the Senate, which would be against grain as far as all midterm elections go. It's, you know, it's the myth is true in the sense that, well, not a myth, but the saying is true. You know, the defending or the incumbent party is a bad time in the midterms. This might not be quite the case. So there's a lot to come in that regard.
If we go to 2024, if you don't believe Biden's going to win, I obviously he's a 6-1 chance, so it's unlikely. I do believe the Democrats will win. There has to be some value here. So what are you looking at? Is anything being backed? It's, as I said, it's 14th bar in the Democratic side.
Nothing in particular being backed. The only sort of price that surprises me a little bit in terms of how short it is Gavin Newsom.
14th.
Not 14th, 5th for the nominee. Sorry, 5th nominee, 14th
Gotcha.
to be president. I think there's definitely value. I mean, it just depends on who you think is going to fill the Biden void. Do you think it would be Harris as vice president? If so, you know, 14 to 1. She won't be 14 to 1. No person who gets seriously involved if Biden makes it known he's stepping down. I don't think he will, by the way. I think he'll run again.
Okay.
But no person.
I think back them both, personally.
Yeah.
You back in who?
I think if you've backed both Biden and Harris at the current odds, you'll have a position to trade because either he runs and he's unopposed in that case, or he's opposed by some Bernie Sanders or someone who will just get thrashed.
Yeah. And
if you're on about the media, sorry to interrupt, William. If you're on about the media, Paul, I just think Harris is the easiest person for these fascist idiots to target online effectively. There's so much artillery that they can have there, which I think might prove her downfall.
Look, I'm not saying it would be a good idea, but I think if there is a Democrat primary to replace Biden as the incumbent, as the VP, she's in a very strong position. And I would say as well that, you know, as we're talking about, they're getting an agenda through. If the Democrat base regards that administration as competent, then why not? Why not go?
Fair, William?
Yeah, I share your concerns regarding Harris being an easy target because, again, this is nothing sort of against her, but if you look at the amount of stick that she's gotten to this point, almost equal, if not more than Biden, and the fact that her approvals were always a bit lower, and the fact that in the last election, you know, she didn't get as far as I think the market had expected at one point, then she becomes potentially vulnerable. But I also think we're dealing with a fairly different situation, you know, down the line. I think people might be much more aware to the dangers of the 4 more years of giving Trump the controls if he's running or whatever. And if there's more achievements and also she gets Biden's support, that could be a different situation entirely. But at the moment, I would agree with Paul. You know, if you're of the opinion that the Democrats win at 5-4, then Dutching Biden and Harris, or Biden even any other at 6-1 and 4-1 above might well give you
6 and 14. Last word on the US to you, Paul.
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, I'm into 24. Obviously, I will be into it, but I think for now we should just focus on the Senate, because I think, and don't even worry about the House. Looking at the way those states stack up with Arizona and Pennsylvania, particularly Georgia, and the candidates, Democrats are going to hold it.
Okay, that's a nice thought for us to leave the US. On to the UK. I mean, speaking of despair, I don't know where to start here, but the latest betting, last time I looked, it was 1-12. I think 1-12. So basically, looked like the game was up for Sunak. We still have prices though on the Liz Truss vote share. Now the favorite is 60-65 is 5-4. 65-70 is 15-8. Starting with you, Paul.
I'd go for the 60-65 personally. Not much of a heat. The big news this week is that Labour are finally favourites to win most seats in the next election.
This has taken a long time.
This has taken a long time, but there's definitely been a poll move in the last week. And I wish Neil was here because we could have some chat here about Starmer. No, I mean, I'm not, without making any personal, because I'm not personally that convinced with Starmer at all, but I think strategically he's played a blinder here. Kept out of the firing line.
Yeah. Done very little.
I'm very and then when it mattered, come in and said, we will cancel the energy bills rise. Suddenly, over to you guys. What are you going to do about it?
I have to say, yeah, I have to say, William, I find the Conservative Party leadership battle one of the grimmest spectacles in my lifetime, really, if you're going to look at British politics. But what do you make of the sort of the Liz Truss vote, presuming that she's going to win? She's more or less over the line on that front.
Yeah, I have it as a Liz Truss government. In fact, we already have a good outline of who will be in cabinet. Kwarteng, apparently all but Chancellor already. Jane's cleverly frontrunner to be the Foreign Secretary. Scholar Braveman set to be new Home Secretary, or tipped to be new Home Secretary. This according to Sebastian Payne, Whitehall correspondent of the Financial Times. And roles in cabinet for Rees-Mogg, Badenoch, Therese Coffey, and return to government for Tom Tugendhat and Ian Duncan-Smith. Just on the vote share, I would agree with Paul. I think the market has it about right. I don't think 5 to 4 is a terrible bet for 60 to 64.99%. I think you'll have worse. You could have lots worse in politics at the moment. And I think it's basically about done. Sunak keeps on fighting, and I think it might be his only option, really. I don't see him. I wouldn't have seen him accepting health, to be honest with you. Had he been invited into Truss's cabinet. And I think, yeah, it'll be about done. And I think we can all start preparing for Prime Minister Truss. Just
to bring you back in, Paul, on this, like, if you look at the Boris Johnson, right, who now actually a bit like the post-communist era in the USSR, where people pine for something that actually wasn't great, but might actually be a little bit more inspiring than what's to come. People are already pining for Boris because Liz Truss is so unimpressive. But I do wonder if you get to the stage where the Conservative Party has so many deeply unimpressive individuals, is this a reflection on how poisonous politics has become, where decent people just don't want to do it anymore?
Absolutely, and everything we're saying in the States applies here to the right, and to the far left as well. I'm not making some, but it's about micro-targeted propaganda. And what we're seeing with Boris Johnson, with Liz Truss, is that, you know, active people on the right want things that are never going to happen. And they've got an agenda that is so unrealisable, they're just going to get angrier and angrier. The latest thing being the channel crossings, because this could, I personally think Truss is going to have a disaster. I think there is going to be a backlash on the right wing, probably a far right backlash of some description, maybe a new party, maybe street vote, street protests, whatever. And, you know, the bottom line is, as long as we're outside the European Union, have no relationship with France, that's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Crossings, right? And yet they're in denial. I mean, we're just mentioning the cabinet. You missed out a big one. As the Sun reports today, Brexit guru Lord David Frost.
Oh, how did I miss? I'm so frustrated. Yes,
being wooed to join the cabinet. I mean, what a hard sell that must be, because he did that Brexit deal so well. The Brexit deal he negotiated and then says it's a disaster. There must be organisations the world over queuing up to get Lord David Frost on board.
Yeah, but I mean, like, William, Liz Truss flipped on Brexit, and yet now the hard Brexiteers are behind her. I don't know. What do you say?
Yeah, listen, I don't have high hopes.
We've got two great lines today. The second one, I don't have high hopes.
In all seriousness, what we're seeing from the briefings is still very much a complete misunderstanding of the scale of the crisis. Truss is talking about trying to get stuff running and rolling through 2023. And I think there's a sort of delusion amongst her that we'll have a difficult winter and it might get very bad. And then when we get into spring, everything will be fine. When that is absolutely not the case. Anybody with half a brain knows that is not the case. I don't know who in government is yet doing that serious thinking, because we have a zombie government at the moment, because Boris Johnson's already checked out, and the incoming administration seems for the moment not to want to face up to what is likely going to be needed, which is probably an emergency budget. Well, they said they'll have a fiscal event, but in reality, COVID-style support.
Okay.
We're asking. That's going to be about 70 to 100 billion, I would have thought, would at least be needed. I don't see how you prevent about several thousand small and medium-sized businesses going under and at least like 8 to 10 million people going to fuel poverty if you don't do that.
Okay, let's briefly finish up on Brazil. I mean, we've had a lot of apocalyptic scenes across the world of late. The Amazon rainforest being chopped down, another that probably isn't reported very well. But the Silva, I think, in fairness, Neil Channing was all over in terms of this election. Star Sports doesn't appear to have odds at the moment, but Paul, it's fair to say the Silva's taken strong favoritism here against the admirable Bolsonaro.
He has. He's much shorter, I should say, on Predict It in America than Betfair, because the Betfair market is present after the election, and it's crystal clear that Bolsonaro is going to deny the result if he loses.
Silva could be stealing this election.
No, Silva. Sorry, Bolsonaro would claim that he was being stolen, right? And there could be riots. Personally, I don't really find that convincing because Lula da Silva will have international support. America will not go along with that. Brazil will do what they have to do to stay in America. But it's just another leg of that global crime syndicate I was talking about. Bolsonaro is another part of that same network, same tactics everywhere.
Last word to you, William. I'm just amazed to talk about Bolsonaro, and the headline is he hasn't got COVID. The guy gets COVID about once every 3 weeks. Actually, even more than that. So yeah, that's just astonishing. Yeah, I would agree with that. That will be a really big global flashpoint. That shouldn't be underestimated. Here in the UK, and I think in some Western media, we can other certain elections in certain places and completely miss stuff. I know we were talking beforehand about China and the crisis there. Don't sleep on Brazil. That will be big on a number of fronts.
Thanks a million to the guys. And yeah, if you are one of our Ukrainian followers, happy national holiday. We haven't even mentioned that. There's too much. Yeah, too much shit going on in the world. And I mean, who even knows? What do they call these false flag events that Russia is getting involved in now? Maybe we'll talk about that next week, because I do know one thing. Paul Krishnamurty might be a bit bleak about life, but he does love a chat about Putin and Russia. We'll be back soon.